BRICS, the group of emerging countries led by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, just invited 5 new countries in 2024, 2 of them being from the African continent. And the floodgates appear to be wide open as many countries look to join in the next expansion window. So in this video, let's focus on 3 African countries who could join, why they are such a good fit to the BRICS overall strategy, and how this could have an impact on the global economy going forward. I'll be doing this by ranking each country on a scale of 1 to 10 in 3 different categories. But before we get into any of that, we first need to understand what's at stake for these African countries, because while many believe joining BRICS could bring them huge rewards, there are also some inherent risks. The African economy is ready to explode, and everyone knows it. The IMF see African nations controlling 6 of their top 10 growth spots for 2024, highlighting South Africa and Nigeria. The continent has been receiving investments from all around the world, Western nations like the United States and emerging countries like China, but both of these do come with a little bit of controversy and some underlying motivations from both sides. People blame China for getting these countries in massive debt through their Belt and Road Initiative, and even though they've come in and built some important infrastructure, many will say that they're just offering loans to countries that will never be able to pay them back, making them forever indebted to China. As for the West, people tend to think that when they come to Africa, their motivation is to stabilize a country by shifting its mindset to a democratic leadership foundation, but really, when they end up leaving, they have nothing to show for it. The truth is, China has been way more involved in Africa than the West have, leading them to try and play catch up a little bit because both sides know the importance that this continent could have. So that is the dilemma of these countries who might need to decide if they want to join BRICS or not. Will choosing one of these sides help or hurt their growth in the long term? But none of this will even matter if Africa isn't able to harness their exponentially growing population. So not just putting people to work, but putting people to work with quality jobs. Let's look at this possibility for Africa through a different context. While the world is getting older, Africa has remained relatively the same. This graph shows the population percentage that is 65 years and older for each region of the world through 2020. Europe, Central Asia, and North America are above 15%. The world average sits just under 10%, while Africa comes in at around 3%, the lowest in the world. That is reinforced with this graph here, which shows Africa has by far the highest percentage of its population under 30 years old and under 14 years old. And if we compare its population growth to some of the top economies in the world, you will see that Africa is projected 2.2% growth by 2030, whereas the United States sits at 0.5%. China will be in the negative, and even India, expected to see their own population boom, is only expected to increase population by 0.75%. Comparing an entire continent to individual countries isn't necessarily the best way to go about looking at it, but it is important to put them side by side for additional context. The continent has banded together to help make this projected boom a reality. In 2018, they established the African Free Trade Agreement in hopes of turning the continent into one market and help reduce trade frictions with one another. And as of this recording, 54 countries have opted into what is being called the largest free trade agreement in the entire world. The World Bank thinks this can help bring 30 million people out of extreme poverty if it reaches its full potential. Emphasis on reaching their full potential. Leadership needs to get more jobs in these countries to put people to work. The data says that the next 30 to 50 years are critical, and planning for that needs to start now. But let's transition now to BRICS expansion. In 2024, 5 new countries accepted the invitations: Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and 2 African nations, Egypt and Ethiopia. It seems very obvious the 2 specific strategies BRICS was using during the last expansion process. So let's dive into those and see how those strategies apply to African countries that could be joining BRICS. The first strategy they used involved location and regional balance. Since South Africa had the weakest economy of the 5 founding BRICS members and likely the smallest global influence among the group, it made sense that the continent gained 2 new countries. With China and India being the 2 largest economies within BRICS, it made sense that no new countries were added from their specific region. And with Brazil out in the middle of nowhere, it made sense for BRICS to try and invite a Latin American country, which they did do with Argentina, but unfortunately that didn't work out. I've already done this same exercise with Latin America, trying to find 3 countries that could be a good fit to join BRICS. So if you're interested in that, I have the link for you down in the description to watch after you're done with this one, of course. The other factor to this location strategy is their actual physical location on an actual map and how it could benefit BRICS going forward. This is pretty crazy. Look at where these 5 countries are located: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, all in close proximity to each other, all of them except Ethiopia on the coast, making it easier for global trade, and one of them, Egypt, controlling one of the most important trade routes in the world, the Suez Canal. These waters will now be monitored by BRICS countries. Their second strategy is to control the world's energy supply. With the additions of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, BRICS will now have 6 of the top 10 oil producers in the world, and this is significant. Even as the world is trying to get a little greener, the need for oil isn't going away anytime soon. So now let's take those strategies, the first being an oil and energy producer, the second around location and regional balance, and I've added a third, which is the country's actual interest in joining BRICS. Just because a country would be a good fit doesn't necessarily mean that they actually want to join. So I will be ranking each of these categories out of 10 for a possible score of 30. Make sure to stick around to the end where we will summarize all of the countries, go over the final standings, and oh yeah, there might be a bonus country. Let's start this thing off with a country that checks off most of the boxes: Algeria. They currently have the 4th largest economy in Africa, are the 16th largest oil producer in the world, including a member of OPEC, and they are the 5th in the world when it comes to natural gas production. All very impressive, but what about their location? Located along the northern African coast, they will see a lot of trade flow by as they are in between one of the most popular trade routes in the world. But they don't have a top 100 seaport in the world, which to me means that they haven't utilized their location to the best of their ability. As far as their interest in joining BRICS, it was reported last year that Algeria had formally applied to join BRICS, and their leadership even tried to add a sweetener on top by saying if accepted, they would contribute $1.5 billion to the BRICS Bank, otherwise known as the New Development Bank. This would have been the highest entry fee out of the non-founding members, but they were overlooked during that cycle for Egypt and Ethiopia. So let's give Algeria some grades. For their impressive oil and energy production, I'm giving them an 8. Location, I'll give them a 5 with room to grow. And interest in joining BRICS, I will give them a 9 for a total score of 22. Let's transition now to the second country on the list that could join BRICS, but don't worry, we don't have to travel far. We're going right next door to Morocco. It's crazy what geography can do because Algeria and Morocco, while they're neighbors, couldn't be more different. Morocco barely squeaks into the top 100 in the world when it comes to oil production. They are 83rd in natural gas production, but they do sport the 6th largest economy in Africa. And that likely has to do with its location, sharing the waters with Spain on one of the most important pieces of water in the world, the Gibraltar Strait. It would start to get very interesting if BRICS had more control over this specific waterway to add it to the list of the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. Again, this is a huge shortcut moving goods from one place to another instead of having to go all the way around Africa. Now, what about their interest in joining? This is where it gets interesting. In 2023, the BRICS Summit was in South Africa, and during the lead up to the event, their leadership came out and said Morocco had applied for membership. But then Morocco came out and countered saying they had not applied to BRICS and called out South Africa for being, quote, hostile. So either they didn't apply and something got lost in translation, or they wanted to announce it on their own terms maybe, but either way, there's a ton of confusion here, and that will be reflected in the scoring, which we'll get to now. For oil and energy production, I'll give them a 3. For location, they get a 10, and for interest in joining, I'll give them a 5 for a total score of 18. This will probably be one of the lowest scores in the entire 3-part series, but BRICS does enjoy a good strategic location, which makes Morocco interesting in my opinion. Let's move a bit more south for the third country on the list, which is Angola. They have the 8th largest economy in Africa and the 17th largest oil production, and are 44th when it comes to natural gas production. They formally left the OPEC organization as they are looking to diversify revenue because Angola's oil exports made up about 90% of all of their exports. Their prime minister understands the importance of technology, a skilled workforce, and strategic partnerships that could help the country move on from oil and called for more Chinese investment specifically in the country's coffee, batteries, and solar energy sectors. They are positioned on the coast, but similar to Algeria, do not have a large seaport. As far as their interest in joining BRICS, they expect to become a member in the next expansion cycle. Angola's ambassador to Russia said Angola is developing so rapidly that it is no longer classified by the UN as an underdeveloped country. And this fact is, of course, a very good indicator. This is exactly the factor that will allow Angola to join BRICS. And with the 2024 BRICS Summit taking place in Russia, there could be some insider information here, but let's get to the grades. For its oil and energy production, I'll give them a 7. For location, they get a 5, and interest in joining BRICS, they get a 9, for a total score of 21. You made it to the bonus country, but before we get into that, I wanted to remind you that this is the second video of a 3-part series highlighting countries around the world that could be good fits to join BRICS, and we're doing that in 3 separate regions. Latin America, which is already ready for you down in the description after you watch this one. We're currently working on Africa, and the third part of this series will be touching on Asian countries. Back to the video. At the end of 2022, this country has the highest GDP out of any country within Africa. Yes, higher than South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia. That country is Nigeria. Nigeria is 15th in the world when it comes to oil production and 12th when it comes to natural gas. As far as location, the largest economic country on the western coast of Africa, they happen to have the 4th largest seaport in the entire continent. And you'll notice the seaports ahead of them are on the eastern or southern coasts, leaving Nigeria in a perfect situation to be the entry point to Western and even Central Africa. As far as their interest, their leadership said they technically did not apply for BRICS membership, which saw them get passed up for Egypt and Ethiopia. But many people expect them to join as they look to improve their foreign policy relations, as well as a mindset shift economically. A representative of Nigeria said the country should be looking to trade their oil in their currency, removing the intermediary currencies that were used before, specifically the dollar. This move would in fact help their economy, as more countries would need to hold their currency in order to buy oil from them, but it's a currency that isn't necessarily seen as the strongest, so I don't know the kind of interest it would have, but you do have to appreciate the thought process. Quite frankly, a process that is one of BRICS's strategies. It's time for grades. Oil and energy production, they get an 8. Location, they get a 7. And interest in joining, they get an 8, giving them a total score of 23. Let's look at the final totals for each of the 4 countries. Nigeria leads the way with 23 points, followed by Algeria with 22, Angola with 21, and Morocco sitting on 18. I think the top 3 countries would actually be a great fit to join BRICS, but there is no way all 3 of these get invited at the same time, so let me know which of these is your favorite to join BRICS. If you liked this video, you'll love the Latin American video going through the same process. Who's going to be joining? Find out in this video here.